Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of RayCor Intel Deep Dive. I am your stand-in host today. I'm Jennifer Bowman, and I lead marketing here at RayCor Consulting, and I'm stepping in for a very special episode today. We had a little bit of a last-minute plot twist, and as our scheduled guest couldn't make it, but honestly, I think it worked out in our favor because today we're flipping the script a little bit. Instead of interviewing an industry heavyweight, I am interviewing the heavyweight behind RayCor Consulting, Christina Rea, founder, CEO, attorney, former Binance insider, the person who somehow built a consulting firm, a personal brand, a full client roster, and a Substack cult following, all while dealing with regulators, tech bros, and her cat Ramona's attitude. So much. This episode's theme is gratitude with tea, not the soft social media version, but the kind you earn by going through things. The kind where you look back at your life and career and say, actually, thank God I went through that. And thank God that happened. I needed that slap in the face. Christine has been very open about how adversity shaped her, fueled RayCor, and created the voice so many of you follow. So today we're diving into it all: the wins, the failures, the plot twists, the personal rebuilds, and the very real reasons she's still great for. Christina, thank you for letting me put you in the hot seat. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm excited that I get to answer the questions this time.
And I'm excited to get to ask you the questions. All right, let's get to it. So, when you think about gratitude, what comes to mind and how has your sense of gratitude evolved over your career?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And timely too, given that next week is Thanksgiving and everyone goes around the table and says what they're grateful for. When I think of gratitude, I think of taking a moment, taking a beat out of my day and thinking through all of the things that I have in my life. Because I feel like generally, me and most people are just kind of jumping from task to task. Like we're leaping from lily pad to lily pad without taking a moment to stop and think why we're doing what we're doing or appreciating what we have. So gratitude to me is taking that beat to appreciate what it is I have. And like anybody else, I'm grateful for good friends, family, awesome head of marketing, all the things that make the world turn. But when I was thinking through, gratitude and what that really means, and when I think through my career and all the questions I get asked about my career, there's a lot of, excuse my French, but we're all friends here. There's been a lot of shit that's happened that at the time seemed scary and insurmountable, but now in retrospect, when I look back on it, I think, wow, things really worked out the way they're supposed to, because otherwise I don't know if I'd be here in this
Yeah.
particular position in my life.
Yeah, and having known you for a few years now and seeing you go through so many of these changes, I can say, I can agree with what you're saying because you definitely have grown a lot. And I think you've gotten to where you need to get to and where you're going um, because of the evolution of things. And so, with that said, how do you think adversity or failure plays a role in shaping good judgment?
That is an excellent question. You can't really appreciate what you've got or learn lessons to get you to where you want to go without going through some adversity. If everyone just had it easy and everything went their way all of the time, what lessons would we learn, and how would we grow as people? Because at the end of the day, it's really about growth. And not just your bottom line, not just revenue growth, but personal growth. And that's something I've given a lot of thought to this year. When you start a business, you're so scared. Oh my God, I got to take every client I possibly can. And, I don't want to make waves on negotiating salary or anything like that. Um, but as time goes on, and you go through a lot of these really adverse experiences, you grow. And now I'm more able to think through, well, what do I want to be doing? What do I want to be focusing time on? And there's just no way I could have done that without a lot of adverse events that came, before I even started the company. and just a lot of nonsense I've had to deal with since I started the company.
Yeah. You talk about growth, and you can't grow without coming over some battle wounds, battle scars. So, hearing you talk about compliance for the couple of years I've worked with you now, it sounds like every compliance professional has battle scars. Can you share a moment from your one moment from your career that felt like a setback at the time, but now feels like it was one of the best teachers?
Oh god. How do I choose just one? It's like being asked, who your favorite child is, your favorite ice cream flavor. How do I pick my favorite bullshit moment that I went
Well,
through,
if you're
whether
short,
it's
maybe you can do
traumatic.
2.
Oh gosh. Well, probably the most adverse thing that I've had to go through no fault of my own was graduating law school in 2009. Um, a lot of people had a job lined up. I didn't, and I went to school in Boston, and I just had this notion like I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get a job. And let me tell you, life humbled me real fast. All those shiny law firm jobs and partner track jobs, they dried up after the recession of 2008. So this is something I don't talk about a lot, although I'm very happy to. My very well, I don't want to say my first job. My very first job out of law school, I worked for a solo practitioner in the depths of Brooklyn for about a month before I realized it wasn't sustainable to work for $1,500 a month. So my first real salary job out of law school was working for a financial analysis company. My background prior to law school, I majored in finance and I worked as a financial analyst for a couple of years. And I was making less money out of law school than I was out of my bachelor's degree. I was making 30,000 a year, and I was happy to have it because it was a job and it was a paycheck. But I cried. I cried every day for the better part of a year and a half, thinking that I was a failure, that I hadn't done well enough in law school, that I hadn't taken the path I was supposed to, and I was going backwards. But that job was a stepping stone. It was a stepping stone into a legal job, and not only was it that, it was a stepping stone to one of the biggest and best lessons I've learned throughout my career that anyone could learn in any industry. I met some great people. I started learning the value of networking. Some people remain close friends to this day. Some people have leapfrogged, from doing what they were doing into a similar industry as mine. So now we have a great professional relationship. And that's when I started to learn what hustling means. I only got that job because I said I didn't want to practice law. They said, "Oh, you just graduated law school. Don't you want to be a lawyer?" Yes, but I want a paycheck more than I want to be practicing law. So I said, "No, I miss financial analysis. That's really what I want to do." And I started learning what it meant to, to go on interviews, to just really figure out what it was I wanted in life. And yeah, that was my number one. I mean, that was the genesis of all of this, adverse experience. And then when I got to a point where I got into compliance, which was soon thereafter, it felt a little bit personal, like, this economy and the way it is took away dreams from a lot of us, lawyers and whatever else people might have gone to school for when they were graduating around that time. And those jobs are gone, in no small part to fraudsters and scam artists. So compliance felt kind of personal. And then from there, it has been, a long climb up the ladder to my own company. I can't even say the corporate ladder because I was never good at climbing the corporate ladder in any traditional way. But yeah, that is probably the number one adverse experience I've experienced in my adult career.
Yeah, definitely. And in those early days, what would you say was an experience that really tested your patience or your confidence that helped shift your perspective even more?
I had a job working for a very large conglomerate bank, and I won't name the bank, but I'm sure anyone that goes on my LinkedIn will see what bank it was. And I got that job. The person who hired me, I was the only person not on the team to be an internal hire. And she hired me, I think 'cause she wanted me to be her buddy. She really didn't ask me how much I knew about anti-money laundering transaction monitoring. Um, and I had to manage a team of people that resented the shit out of me because they hadn't gotten the job, they hadn't been promoted. And I had to deal with a lot of changes happening within the bank. The bank was under a monitorship and a consent order for having, compliance deficiencies. So on the one hand, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the regulator, is my boss and the monitor is my boss. And that's really, who I have in mind when I'm doing my job. And then internal management was like, no, we want things to be as business as usual as possible. And I think it's conservative to say that I got in some hot water there. I think the straw that broke the camel's back for them was when they were trying to, for KPIs, they were trying to close out cases before day 30. Anyone that's worked in transaction monitoring knows the rule is you have to have everything investigated and closed out by day 30 if you find it to be suspicious. And for whatever reason, they wanted, that everything had been closed out by day 29 on their reports. And there was one where I didn't feel comfortable closing it. I wasn't 100% certain. Um, they told somebody on my team close it, so he did, and I reopened it myself. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the end for them looking for reasons to get rid of me. And I was, again, I cried. I was like, I was constantly being told, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know compliance, you don't know anti-money laundering. And, I had shifts of confidence and I had a lot of self-doubt during that time. But I stuck with it. I kept the blinders on and I kept going. And at the time I just thought to myself, dear God, I'm never gonna get a job again. But not continuing in traditional finance after that job led me to my next job, which was in reg tech. That's where I started learning about blockchain and crypto and, all the tech that we now know and love. And thank God I didn't get the next job at the next bank because who knows where I'd be.
Yeah. It's always interesting that where you end up next doesn't seem like what you necessarily wanted at the time, but it kind of is essentially what we're talking about now, a blessing in disguise.
100%.
Yeah. So we wanted to switch gears just a little bit. We're talking about confidence, but I want to talk a little bit about gratitude, the theme of today's episode. Hearing you talk and others in the field talk and, you know, just being around the fintech and compliance world, it sounds like it's often a thankless field. Um, so how do you stay grounded and find satisfaction in the work you're doing when you're the one who's saying no or identifying risks that other people don't want to see, want to stick their head in the ground and just be like, I don't hear you, I don't see you.
Um, well, there's a healthy dose of "I told you so" that happens in my job. Not that I ever want a client to get into trouble, but when we're reading the news and we see banks and financial companies, getting consent orders, or getting sanctioned because they didn't have a proper compliance program, it helps. It helps build the case. So, what I've learned throughout my career is I'm not there to tell anybody no. I'm not there to be the boogeyman. I'm not there to be mean mommy. I'm there to advise. So if you're asking me, I want to launch this platform. I want to, operate in this jurisdiction. I want to know if I should get these licenses or not. My job is to advise you. So that helps keep me grounded quite a bit. Compliance officers, our motto is document, document, document. So I make sure to put everything in writing and documentation in emails when I'm advising. But I try to really understand where clients are coming from. If they're building something, I understand their excitement around, the build and wanting to add something new to the ecosystem because I'm building something. It's a little different, but yeah, you get a lot of excitement, you get a lot of adrenaline, and you don't want to be told no because of a regulatory hiccup. So I'm always trying to look for ways, to work with my clients, to advise them. These are the risks and to ultimately, keep my ego in check and stay out of it. I didn't invent any of the laws or the regulations or the best practices. I can't take credit for it. at the end of the day, as long as things are compliant, as long as there's still room for innovation, I'm very happy. And the fact that I have a wonderful network of colleagues and compliance and tech and finance to bounce ideas off of, to go to when I'm having doubts, I am forever grateful for that.
And so, what do you think leaders in the industry could do to better express gratitude, not just for success, but for integrity under pressure?
What can leaders do to express gratitude? I mean, saying thank you, it sounds silly and it sounds obvious, but really saying thank you more frequently than you think you should, I think that that goes a long way. I mean, even in my house with my husband, if he makes dinner or does something nice or does a chore, I just say a simple thank you. Like I want him to know that I appreciate it and that I don't take it for granted. Same goes, in industry. If someone, someone who works for you or someone's helping you out, sending a simple thank you, I appreciate it, expressing your gratitude. I think that goes a longer way than people give it credit for, and then showing gratitude through action, like saying thank you and expressing gratitude, that's all well and good, but how do we show it in action? That's different for everybody, but for people that I'm, extraordinarily grateful for, I show gratitude by how can I help you? How can I be a resource to you? Is that introducing clients to you? Is that mentioning you in on my socials, featuring you in a deep dive interview, doing a post on you on LinkedIn, sharing something, that's meaningful or that will drive engagement for you? What can I do to be a resource? There's one of me, so I can't do as much as I would like for everyone. But I do try my best to let people know that I see them, that I appreciate them, and I want to express my gratitude in a way to them that makes sense to them. Kind of like the love languages, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's your gratitude language? Is it simply saying thank you? Is it, a shout out on social media? Let me know what that is, and I will be happy to do it.
Yes. I definitely think that should be a thing in the workplace because what gratitude and appreciation looks like for one person, it can be different for someone else. Like I am definitely a person who wants the recognition of ideas, like be
Mhm,
like, "Oh, Jennifer had this great idea." And
mhm.
it sounds like you want that like recognition of like, "Thank you for that. Thank you."
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that, and now how can I help you make money? That's the best way to show gratitude, right?
Yes. That sounds familiar. Okay. And so let's with gratitude comes wisdom, some would say. And so you have worked in both domestic and international, hello Binance, contexts. Has working globally changed your view of what we should be grateful for in the United States compliance systems, or are you more critical of them?
I think, both, honestly. So to the first point, am I grateful for what we have? In some respects, yes. We do have guardrails in place. We do have, an outline. We do have checklists. We do have a compliance, almost unspoken manual in place in the US that all compliance officers are given, and expected to follow. And it's not necessarily that way in every jurisdiction. Having a lot of the resources and availability of resources we have here in the US, I think is one of our greatest strengths. It's very easy to get complacent in the job and just think, okay, I know everything I need to do for this specific job, but there's so much more to learn and there's so much opportunity here, to attend webinars or find resources, to be able to learn and grow and expand your career. Compliance as we know it in the US, it's not always a one size fits all for every other jurisdiction. And it's unfortunate that a lot of global agencies try to make it so. They try to force a global regime of compliance that really was built for the Western model, the US, Canada, UK, EU. And it gives short shrift to a lot of the financial ecosystem in the rest of the world, which we wouldn't really recognize it. Having worked for large, global organizations, I have a healthy appreciation not only for the resources I have an appreciation for the ability to be critical of how it impacts other countries. And just purely, even from a cultural perspective, working with people from around the world and understanding their circumstances, their career paths, what they have to go through in order to make a livable wage, it makes me endlessly grateful for the opportunities here, not only to get a traditional, 9 to 5 job, but the opportunity to build something of your own and run your own business. That's not something that's always as easy and feasible in other countries, especially when the, global language of business is English. And uh, if you're not fluent in it and fluent in tech and finance and compliance language, then it's going to be very difficult for you, to pursue the same opportunities we would here.
Definitely. And speaking of like cultural context and that sort of thing, what moments abroad have most expanded your empathy or appreciation for how culture really impacts and shapes compliance ethics?
I forget the psychologically there's like, the hierarchy of needs. So when you're hungry, when you're homeless, when you're cold, when your basic needs aren't being met fully, things that we love to talk about here, morals and ethics, which are extremely relative. And I'm not going to get very philosophical. I'll save that for my podcast or my Substack. Um, it really can change how you think about things, so having had the opportunity to travel fairly extensively abroad and meet people who work in compliance, they love the opportunity to work in this industry because they might live in countries that are extremely corrupt, with politicians, that or not so much elected as forced their way in through bribery and corruption and horrible acts of violence. So to them, compliance really, it means something. It means trying to have, a better way of life. But at the end of the day, they they don't they don't make the money that we're making here, but they're still working for American companies, and so when I meet people that really passionately believe in this industry, that believe in compliance, that love their job, that really want to do a great job, even at, an analyst level, kind of an entry level, I'm humbled and I'm inspired by that. They're living in conditions that I only get a glimpse into that I can't imagine living in. And they care just as much. I mean, let's be honest, probably a lot more than I do about the job at hand. And I don't even think it's just because, they need the money or the paycheck. I think they see what goes on in their countries when this kind of stuff is left unchecked and they have a personal interest, they're personally vested in trying to make things better.
Definitely. That's a really good perspective to have. And so, with that, if we could go back to you and your younger self, if you could thank yourself, thank your younger self for one thing, like a trait, decision, or a risk you took, what would it be?
Thank you to my younger self for always trusting your gut and believing that you were worth more than a lot of people wanted you to believe. I didn't take the lateral moves when recruiters, after I left that large conglomerate bank, told me I should be grateful that another bank was offering me the same amount of money in a lateral move. I said, nope, I can do better than that. I'm not taking it. No deal. Thank you, self, for never listening when people told me that I should just kind of heal and be grateful for the little bit I had. I always believed I could do more, I knew more, I was smarter, I was more capable. Didn't always make a lot of friends with that mentality, although now I like to think I have a few friends, but it did get me to this point. I kept the blinders on, I dried my tears, I got up, I kept talking to people and applying for other jobs and just pushing the envelope, and that's what got me to where I am today.
Definitely. And that is definitely you to a T.
That is me.
Cannot dispute. And earlier in this conversation, you talked about, graduating law school in 2009 and the pivots that you had to take in your career due to just state of the world. Uh, what do you hope future generations of compliance professionals, those, you know, coming into a similar situation right now, are hoping to learn earlier than you did?
Believe in yourself and your capabilities a lot faster. You don't have to take something just because it's been the status quo for a long time or because older generations say that you should. I see a lot of Gen Z out there doing their own thing, becoming influencers, doing master classes, God, I don't even know. I feel like such an old person. But they're creating opportunities for themselves. They're not waiting for somebody else to sit around, and help them get that foot on the ladder. They're kicking the ladder over and they're building a better ladder or the AI replacement of a ladder. I don't know. And I really hope that they continue that. I really hope that they continue breaking out of, this 9 to 5, grateful for a job, corporate mold and doing their own thing, because there is so much room out there for innovation, for passion and enthusiasm, and for people who are doing it right. I remember going to see a career counselor at some point. That's how desperate I was to get a job. And he didn't tell he told me, I mean, it was an hour of garbage. I mean, it was basically an hour of, ninth grade guidance counselor. Here's what you should be when you grow up. But he did tell me one thing that has stuck with me, one good piece of advice. When we were talking about something I could do as a side hustle, I said to him, aren't there a million people already doing that? How would I stand out? And he said to me, there is always room for quality. So I hope everyone gets that out of this, if nothing else. Whatever it is you're doing, however, doubtful you may feel, there's always room for quality. So if you've got a great idea, you research the hell out of it and you put the time into it, go for it.
Very wise words. Um, so our interview is almost over. Do you have time for a quick lightning round of a couple of questions?
Oh God. Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So, a book or mentor that you are most grateful for?
Oh God. I mean, my mentor, it's wild how I met him. So that first job post large bank, that reg tech company that I talked about, they had no idea what they were doing and I had no idea what I was doing. They weren't building a platform to try to respond to a market problem. They just kept going to leads and saying, "Okay, what do you want?" and then trying to build it, not understanding that not every area of law and compliance is the same. So they asked me to help them build a product around trade-based money laundering. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I don't know anything about that. So esoteric. TLDR, I had to figure it out. I went on LinkedIn. I looked up everyone I could find that had trade finance, trade-based money laundering in their profile. I think 2 people responded to me. One of them was a guy named Ross. He lived in DC at the time. He said, I'm going to be in New York next week. Let's meet up and I'll talk to you about it. And he will never take credit for anything that I've done or that I've built, but he's given me so much guidance and wisdom and help and confidence over the years. So from my original mentor, Ross, who now lives in St. Louis, very grateful for him.
Yay, Roz. All right. A career mistake that you're secretly thankful happened.
Oh God, a mistake that I'm grateful. That's so interesting because I don't know. I don't know if it's just my trauma background trying to reposition everything from being mistakes to being opportunities. Um, Yeah, I don't wanna sound like a cornball, but yeah, I try to take, mistakes that have happened and reframe them as, opportunities. I remember I lived in DC in 2012. I was working, for a consulting company, and I was doing mortgage stuff, and I didn't wanna live in DC anymore, so I interviewed with that same company in New York in their anti-money laundering division, and I was just so grateful to have a job that I did not negotiate salary. And that was the last time in my life I ever didn't negotiate salary. 2 weeks later, I learned what other people on the project were making. They were making at least 15 grand more than I was. My jaw dropped to the floor. I turned around, I immediately started interviewing, and I left 2 weeks after that.
Right.
So, as annoying as it was to have not been making that money from go, lit the proverbial fire under my ass, never settle for less than I'm worth. And since then, oh boy, was that a lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah. That's a good lesson. One that I need to be better at myself.
We can all take, a way that we can, advocate for ourselves better all the time, especially women.
Yeah. All right. Compliance myth you're glad life cured you of.
Compliance myth that I'm glad life cured me of. I mean, this isn't a myth, but God, am I tired of hearing it, the risk-based approach. It's not a myth, but I think the term gets tossed around without people really understanding exactly what it means. When it comes specifically to anti-money laundering, and I speak to this from both a practitioner standpoint and an expert witness standpoint, having opined on legal cases, the laws out there aren't they're not great in terms of what we actually need to be doing and not doing. And there's no law that codifies a risk-based approach. I don't know if people really understand that because the term is just bandied about all the time. It's really up to the institution to determine what their risk levels are. And of course, there's exam guidance and regulator guidance out there about what they expect to see. But at the end of the day, if you have very sound and documented logic for your, reasons for why you do certain things, onboard certain customers, make certain decisions, that is ultimately the risk-based approach. It's not some mythical law that, we can't figure out and, someone is holding us to some impossible standard. It really is, situational and institutional per institution. So as time has gone on and certainly working as an expert witness and absolutely being raked over the coals from our understanding of laws such as they are, I'm glad I've learned more what that means in this industry and, kind of hopefully taken some of the stigma out of it as I educate, colleagues and clients around
Who's your favorite cat, Ramona or Henry?
it. Oh man, neither one of them? Is that an acceptable answer? Ramona is definitely the cuddly one, but Henry is my smart and clever boy. He knows how to get food and treats. He knows how to dig into bags and cupboards. So I appreciate Ramona for the cuddles and the love and I appreciate Henry for the cleverness and the craftiness. So
Always diplomatic, even when talking about cats. All right. Well, Christina, thank you for being brutally honest, hilarious, and maybe just a little unhinged in the best way possible. And before we close out, for anyone who wants more of Christina's work, the trainings, the frameworks, the spicy takes, the deep dive white papers, where should they go?
we have a lot of places you can find me. I'm definitely a loudmouth on LinkedIn. Come check me out, Christina Rea Esquire. Last name is spelled REA. My website, RayCor Consulting, RAYCOR consulting.com. We have tons of great info there. You can always drop me an email, Christina@RayCorConsulting.com. Got a podcast coming soon, Risk and Rebels. You'll be learning more about that next month. And a recently launched Substack, if anybody's interested. It's called Compliance Unbound. Gonna have lots of spicy compliance takes there and also just some, personal stories so you guys can get to know me a little bit better beyond the regulatory and compliance curtain.
Yeah. Can you talk about how it's a little bit different from the newsletters so people who are probably wondering, like, why do you have two?
Yeah, no, the newsletter is kind of what's going on at this moment in time, kind of a reflection, self-awareness take on compliance that month, what I have found to be particularly interesting. It's got some resources, maybe a book I read that month that I think would be useful. The Substack is a deeper dive into some of my spicier takes and opinions on things. I've got an article coming out soon about compliance and how it adversely affects the global south, which I alluded to, a little while ago in the interview. So if you're looking for deeper reads, articles that don't quite rise to the level of white paper, and some more intricate thought pieces, that's where the Substack is where to go to check that out.
Yeah. So it's not the Substack is going to be more personal, whereas RayCor Intel Dispatch is still like your voice, but also like company news and industry insights and that sort of thing.
100%. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. So, to everyone listening, if this episode hit home, if it made you think about the version of yourself who walked through fire and came out sharper, make sure you subscribe to RayCor Intel, both Deep Dive on YouTube and Intel Dispatch, their newsletter. We share a link on LinkedIn every time a new edition comes out. Share the episode and send it to a compliance friend who needs to hear something real for once. And this has been RayCor Intel Deep Dive. We'll see you next time with Christina back in this seat, with or without our originally scheduled guest. And remember, gratitude is great, but a little grit never hurts. Bye. Thank you,
Ha-
Christina.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Take
Happy
care.
Thanksgiving.